Welcome back, everybody. In this video we are going to be exploring something called layer masks. For this video I suggest you pull up a photo similar to mine. I have this photo up on Google Classroom that you can grab, but otherwise you can just kind of look up the word barn house or something similar. Alright, let's jump into it. So, again, we are exploring layer masks today. Now, layer masks actually go hand in hand with adjustment layers, which we just went over in the last lesson. Layer masks can be used independently from adjustment layers, but in this case we are going to be using adjustment layers to kind of ease our way into things. So, the first thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be opening up our adjustment layers, and we are going to be selecting black and white. Perfect. Okay. So right now we have an entire image that is all black and whited out. Now, something that we probably just kind of like glossed over when we were going over adjustment layers is the actual look of the layer on the layers panel. So it looks a lot different than your traditional layer with a photo in it. It has two, maybe three significant icons. The first icon is this one right here, which is your layer thumbnail. So it kind of tells you what type of effect that you're using, and when you click it, it actually brings up the effect on your properties panel right above it. So if you ever want to adjust the adjustment layer, that's how you would do that. There's also a little chain here which just indicates that the layer mask is linked to the layer. And the last thing that is super important that we're going to be covering today is this little white box right here. And this white box is actually our layer mask, or our layer mask thumbnail to be specific. Now, one really important thing to note about layer mask is that there's two important colors, black and white. Right now, our layer mask is white. White means active. So whenever you see a white layer mask, that means that the entire layer mask has an active effect being shown. And you know this because if you look at our photo right now, the entire photo is black and white, which means it's covering the entire photo. What's interesting about Photoshop and layer mask is that you can actually mask out certain areas so that if you only want the effect to be shown in one part of the photo, you can kind of establish that. So we talked about white being active. Well, what's the opposite of white? Black, okay? So black means inactive. So whenever we add black to our layer mask, it creates kind of like a hole. It like pokes a hole in our layer mask, which makes that part of the layer mask inactive. Okay, so we're going to get into that right now. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our toolbar. We're going to need a tool to kind of create black areas, and that's going to be our handy dandy brush tool, which is right here. You can also click B on your keyboard to get to it. Another thing that you're going to have to do is change the color. So again, we talked about black and white being super important. You want to make sure you have a pure black. So to do that, what I like to do is I like to just click this little default foreground and background button right here. And then I like to just click these arrows and kind of flip back and forth between black and white. Right now we need black though, so this is fine. Okay, so we are in our brush tool and we talked about that. But you'll notice that since we didn't click the layer mask yet, it doesn't let you do anything. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to go over to my layers panel, and this time I'm going to click the white box. And now we are officially in our layer mask, which means that we can really start doing some cool things. Before we get started though, let me just direct your attention up to the top left corner of Photoshop. You'll see, if you're on your brush tool, a little circle and a number below it. When you click this little drop down menu next to it, you'll see that this allows you to change the size of your brush, and it also allows you to change the hardness of your brush. So for example, instead of having a hard edge, you can also have like a nice soft edge. That's totally up to you. Another really cool thing to keep in mind is that Photoshop always has so many different options on how to do multiple things. So for example, you don't have to go all the way up to the top left corner to change the size of your brush. You can also use key commands on your keyboard. If you look on your keyboard next to the P key, you'll see something called brackets. And when you hold those brackets down, either the left bracket or the right bracket, you'll notice it actually changes the size of your brush, which is really, really handy when you don't feel like going all the way up to the top and changing it yourself. Alright, so now is the fun part. So again, let's just double, triple check that we are in our layer mask, because again, it will not work if we're not in our layer mask. Make sure you're not on your photo, because if you accidentally draw on your photo, you can't really get rid of it. We're in our layer mask. You know it's selected because you have these little white highlights on the corner here. And now we are basically going to start our hole poking. So I am drawing on the red barn house. And my goal right now is to make everything black and white except the barn house. That's kind of like the effect I'm going for right now. Now, I got a little bit of that green area here, and this is where switching colors comes in handy. So we talked about how you can kind of like flip between black and white, so I can just click this button right here to flip. And now I'm drawing with white, so I can actually go over those areas that I, went too deep into. Alright guys, so that is pretty much it. I just want to remind you guys that you can use this layer mask effect that we just did on literally any of the adjustment layers it works on. So experiment with that, and I hope you enjoyed learning about layer masks.